Capturing the essence of gaming, Shangri-La Frontier. Hello, fellow gamers. Let's talk about why Shangri-La Frontiers perfectly encapsulates everything we love and hate about gaming. Out of all the video game inspired media that I've seen, this series gets gaming the most by far. I'll be focusing on the elements of the series that lends itself to being a great representation of gaming. There will be spoilers for what is covered in the first and second season of the anime, but I won't go into things more than necessary so people new to the series can still have a lot to find out for themselves. So, the basic synopsis of Shangri-La Frontier is that it is a show following gaming obsessed Rakuro Hizutome, or whose online alias is Sunraku, and that's who I'll be referring to him as because that's mainly what he's referred to as in the series, and that's much easier. As he takes a break from his trademark garbage games to dive into the god tier game that is Shangri-La Frontier. This is not an isekai, nor a stuck in the game situation. This is just a normal world with highly advanced VR games that allow for complete immersion. This simple and realistic scenario is critical to why this series works so well as an encapsulation of gaming. So, let's start by talking about our main character, who is the ideal representation of the gamer spirit. The love and enthusiasm the series has towards gaming is shown perfectly by Sunraku, who wears that passion on his sleeve and constantly shows it throughout the series. Sunraku is a person who commits fully to his passion for overcoming difficulties in video games. He is steadfast in his dedication to doing whatever it takes to accomplish his goal. Whether that's fighting the same enemy 50 times or 500 times, he is principled in how he plays so he can reach his goal of victory. He is dedicated to the trial and error that it takes to beat games, and which can be applied to various other things. And it's because of the effort and the tenacity that he puts towards beating games that his skills and the victories we see in this series feel earned. We see him struggle, both in Shangri-La and in various other games like garbage games that he manages to get through. He worked hard to beat horribly designed games, and we see how he learned from those experiences, and that makes playing better games even easier. This is just like how a modern game in a platforming series can feel effortless to play after playing an older one that has like really janky physics or anything along those lines. Shangri-La coming easier to him than others is justifiable to me, because his main thing that he does is play games that are optimized and designed horribly. So when something is easy and simple and actually works, it comes to him much more naturally. And that I think that makes sense. He's skilled in figuring out how games work. He's not some convenient genius. He's just a guy with determination and experience that he gains because of pushing through adversity rather than running from it. He represents how people can get good at games and enjoy every aspect of them through dedication and tenacity. His excitement towards the things he does in games is so endearing, and it just further conveys how much this series loves games. Sunraku faces pretty much every gameplay scenario you can imagine. Anyone who plays video games will have moments to relate to. He gets distracted by pointless collectibles, he agonizes over wanting to save good items, but also knowing that they may not get used at all. He experiments with different games, but he still tends to stick to a preferred style. In this case, it's him going with more speed builds. He gets bothered by other players when he just wants to do his thing alone. He hates being stuck with a task that he really wants to complete, but is just out of reach because of a little condition. He forgets what he was doing in a game that he's playing again for the first time in a while, and he jumps between games when one frustrates him too much. And these are just a few things. And the last one is especially great because it functions as both a way for Sunraku and the audience themselves to get a break from Shangri-La. The variety of games you see in this series is really great at keeping things fresh and interesting, and really bringing you into this world of high-tech VR. Senku and this series properly exhibit the joy of exploring new worlds in games. It's also great at celebrating the diversity of games. And so my favorite gameplay scenario is that he has trauma over being hit with ridiculous levels of RNG across different games. People seemingly have better or worse luck than others as a whole, as well as for specific things. We see this with Sunraku having horrible luck with randomized drops, but generally fine luck everywhere else. When it comes to games, you see this spread across various luck-based mechanics. You can see a 70% chance to dodge an attack fail 5 times in a row, but then you can see a 30% chance to crit happen 5 times in a row. If I've learned anything from playing gacha games and other highly luck-based games like Pokemon, is that statistical odds are BS. I'm a victim of Blizzard's 30% chance to miss, feeling like 70%. This is just the way games are, and if you've played a ton of games, you know that RNG never works out how it's supposed to, and that's just an aspect of gaming that we've all come to accept. We see a struggle against a live service game with complicated mechanics, most prominently through his battle with the Crystal Scorpions. Like a smart gamer, he takes advantage of the game's physics engine to take out high difficulty enemies that have really good loot. In this case, using fall damage to kill the scorpions that he had no way of fighting head on. I remember doing stuff like this in games like Skyrim all the time. But he was in for a rude awakening when the devs patched out the exploit that he was taking advantage of. Sanraku getting killed because the devs patched an exploit of the enemy's patterns is really funny, and is also a scenario many gamers who use exploits face all the time, whether it's for speedrunning, doing challenge runs, etc. I'm not big on doing those things personally, but I do watch some of those, and I have seen people's frustration over things getting patched that they really enjoyed. It represents this very specific side of gaming, while also being another moment where we see Sanraku's unbending drive to push forward, where he just tells the devs that he'll find more exploits for them to fix, so he's not going to stop. And this is who Sanraku is. He never gives up, no matter what type of game and what things he's facing in those games. And that's really what makes him such a fun and lovable protagonist. And yeah, he really is like the ideal gamer. He finds a way to make every part of the game his own, and lets nothing stand in his way. He always finds a way forward. Sanraku can indeed feel overpowered at times almost, as a person, with how proficient he is at picking up game mechanics, his reaction time, etc. But he has a reason for that. He built those skills upon persevering through awfully designed games. Moving around in-game and utilizing the mechanics in Shangri-La is easy for him because he's used to working through games that don't function properly. The series takes the time to show various garbage games that he played to make his competency feel believable and earned. Someone who's played terrible games know how frustrating they are to play, and can relate to Sanraku's desire to complete them and his frustrations over doing them. And him pushing through these games also makes the viewers respect Sanraku a lot for being someone who consistently pushes through rather than giving up. He's a gamer that most people would highly respect for his skills and dedication to his craft. In this case, it's beating horrible games. All these traits make for a really great protagonist who is likable, believable, and relatable. On the topic of being overpowered, you could argue that his speed and his luck-based build is overpowered as well. Shangri-La really shows why speed is king in movement-based games, because Sanraku is ridiculously proficient and is able to do lots of incredible things thanks to his build, and really shows the solo player side of gaming with the way he generally prefers to play games. But if overpowered mechanics are used well, I don't think it's a bad thing. Overpowered things are not inherently signs of bad writing and things along those lines. Just think of One Punch Man, for example. But specifically with gaming, we enjoy playing games because of the rewarding feeling that comes with it. Sanraku gets his main reward just from the satisfaction itself of beating something hard, but he also likes the material reward from beating a boss in Shangri-La. One way we're rewarded is through better skills, gear, and etc. And that's what we see here. Will he be truly overpowered once he gets the gear in the inventoria? Honestly, I feel like he probably will. But he wouldn't be getting overpowered just because. He would be because he defeated a special enemy that was meant to be incredibly difficult. He's getting a reward that justifies the effort. And that is what gaming is about. That's the basic gameplay loop. Sanraku should be rewarded handsomely by defeating a near impossible enemy. We want players to feel like the time and effort they put into the game was worth it, so that they continue playing. Overpowered mechanics will always exist in games. A lot of people, including Sanraku, find enjoyment in breaking games and taking advantage of these things. So why not represent that in this story that's a love letter to gaming? It makes perfect sense. If you're trying to really encapsulate this whole sphere of gaming and the enjoyment people get from games and the variety of ways that people get that enjoyment, then you should absolutely talk about things that are game breaking and like overpowered things and stuff like that. It makes sense. And it works here because this series balances mechanics that could be considered overpowered very well. And this is part of what makes this feel like a proper game and properly representing the players. And so we cannot finish talking about Sanraku without going more into detail on his main design, that being his bird head with light clothing. While not only being a very unique and memorable design, it also functions as a representation of the goofy designs some players choose to use. So many main characters in video game inspired fantasy either have a super bland design or one that tries way too hard to be cool. While a lot of people do design playable characters in one of these two camps, there are a lot of people who like goofy designs that are barely functional. Sanraku was designed long before this legendary player came to prominence, but just look at the coincidence of how much Sanraku resembles Let Me Solo Her. I'm pretty sure he didn't design it after Sanraku. It's just nothing but a pot on his head and his weapons. It's just a coincidence because design like Sanraku's is how some people play these games. And this is just perfect that we have a famous example in real life of someone who's just like this. This is very rare representation that is very much appreciated and really shows like the dedication that the original author had for gaming, how much research and everything and passion that went into it. And I especially love it as someone who has given himself very silly designs in video games just because it's fun. The series has a lot of great video game meta humor as well, such as this, poking fun at tropes, how players stereotypically act, etc. I really can't wait until we get into more about the game developers. The small bit we did get from them, like from these insane weirdos who somehow made this nearly perfect game, was hilarious. And when you look at interviews with a lot of game developers and the things they go through and how weird a lot of them are, this also makes perfect sense. And so moving on to Shangri-La itself, the actual game in universe, this is a godlike game that they call in universe that genuinely is godlike. The game world itself and how it is portrayed is done wonderfully. It does a fantastic job making the game world feel like a game without being too stiff and bogged down by mechanics. It's very well balanced. And that fits with the setting of a highly advanced VR game that uses your whole body. Shangri-La really portrays the idea of how video games can be treated like other sports and involve true skill and intelligence. This is what we see with Sanraku. That's why he's able to do so many incredible things, because he's genuinely very skilled at playing VR games. Shangri-La also treats the modern scenario of this properly. Not having characters act like this level of a game is not the norm. This isn't like crappy isekais where we're expected to believe modern teenagers act like someone shooting a fireball out of their hand is something they've never seen before. The game's story is also one that feels very well crafted to fit a video game. In general, it has a very basic story that is simple enough for most players to understand and get into, but it also has deeper lore for the game theorists and story lovers. It drip feeds just enough to keep people interested continuously, then hits you hard in specific moments. Many of us have had times like Setsuna did, where we did not expect to be drawn into the story, but suddenly found ourselves crying over an NPC. The game's sound effects are also excellent, being very satisfying for us as viewers of an anime, but also feeling very accurate to a well-designed game. Skills like parries have a very satisfying and cool sounds that make you feel even more rewarded for landing them. And all this together is to say that Shangri-La is really awesome. I wish this game existed. We're not rolling our eyes over people geeking out about how awesome Shangri-La is. We're right along with Sanraku and the others and saying that this game is awesome. And that really brings you in much more. And again, as I'm going to keep saying, further shows how much this series gets gaming. I completely buy that this is the greatest game in the world in universe. If it really existed in real life, I would have no doubt that it would be one of the biggest games ever. And moving on from that, the other characters in this story also represent the real-world social aspects of the gaming space very well. In a game like this, there would be tons of players who commit to singular aspects of the games that they're passionate about, rather than focusing entirely on fighting like Sunraku largely does. We see this through the different clans, each focusing on a unique aspect of the game. And we're shown how the game appeals to a variety of people, both casual and obsessive. This is how a lot of players go in expansive multiplayer games. Some people just raise pets, they focus on PvP, they roleplay, etc. The general player base is also portrayed much better than other video game inspired series. Players outside of the main characters use the game mechanics competently, rather than just floundering about with the bare basics so that the main character can come in and look cool when they actually understand them. Basically, other people aren't treated like they're stupid. People recognize, for example, the value of a unique scenario, so they try to monopolize it. People debate the ethics of taking pictures of players without their permission, and debate player killing in a game that allows it. They understand that people want to keep things secret, but still will try to expose those things for their own benefit. We have a guy who's trying to use the game to get closer to a girl he likes. The game truly feels like it has a strong community of players and really represents the diversity of players that a game that is very broad in its appeals can bring in. And this really helps with feeling invested in the anime as a portrayal of video games. This series really feels like it gets how the gaming community functions. This series is also great at portraying interpersonal social relationships between people who play games. Sunraku and his two main friends are such a nice portrayal of online friends who primarily play video games together. They have the right amount of distance that you often see with online friends, not being the type to talk to each other all the time, while still getting along super well when they do come together. And the banter between them is just completely on point. They're constantly calling each other out and trolling each other in the best way possible, and doing that while still supporting each other and feeling like people who have played games together for years. Their dynamic is a really great part of the series and feels perfect for like what you think of as gamers. And I touched on Shangri-La's typical enemies a little bit before. If you want representation of what fighting a big bad boss in a video game feels like, Shangri-La will give you everything you want. The fight against Weathermont is just plain awesome. He is the boss that has a massive health bar that feels like it's never going to go down, but you know has to be defeatable. Slowly figuring out your enemy's patterns, getting surprised by new attacks, your confidence wavering with every hit you take and every item you use, and recalling the things you've learned over the course of the game to try to take down this seemingly impossible enemy. This is exactly what an awesome boss fight against what feels like an insurmountable enemy should be. Like many games, it does take a long time to get to this point, but it is very much worth the journey. So, Shangri-La Frontier also captures some of the negative aspects that games can have, but this is not really intended as representation. In the same way games can often have slow and questionable pacing that makes it feel like it's just trying to rack up playtime, the anime shares a bit of this problem. I felt this primarily with the segments following Sunraku fighting the Crystal Scorpions. While it was cool to see him exploit game mechanics to his advantage, and it does have plot relevance, and there is some genuinely cool and interesting stuff here, it did not need to get as much time as it got. It went on a bit too long. Just like how Shangri-La Frontier was throwing a seemingly endless amount of Crystal Scorpions at Sunraku so that he could not make progress, it felt like the scenes with the Crystal Scorpions were slowing down the progress of the anime too much. Padding can be a little frustrating, but on its own, it didn't bother me that much since it was still an enjoyable experience, and Shangri-La already built up a ton of goodwill for me before this point. But we've only talked about how this is slow pacing. Now to talk about why it is questionable. And this is what makes this padding sting more. There was a lot of build-up towards Belok becoming an ancient craftsman, and fixing the non-standard ether reactor going on around the same time as the Crystal Scorpions. But, much to my surprise, the actual moment of both of these things coming to pass happens completely off-screen. This felt very strange, since we've had multiple scenes focused on the craftsman crafting things. The scene of Visage crafting Sunraku's Moonblade is really awesome, and that truly felt like an important in-game cutscene. that really pulls you into the world that you are playing in. The camera angles, his singing, plus that with the music and the length of time it lasted, I thought it was perfect at portraying this kind of like high effort important cutscene. After seeing that, I was hoping Belok would get something similar, and it would still feel fresh because Belok would be fixing what is more so a piece of sci-fi technology that would have been different from Visash's, which was making and fixing a weapon. And not getting this is especially frustrating since it comes right after Sunraku finishes his series of bouts with the Crystal Scorpions, which, as previously stated, felt like it had too much time given to it. I would have liked to see Belok go from a craftsman using a hammer and anvil to a craftsman using ancient but effectively futuristic technology, rather than another 5 minutes of Sunraku fighting against the Crystal Scorpions. A much more balanced way of speeding up the pacing would have been to cut down the time with the Crystal Scorpions and just give that time to Belok. So yeah, this was really not done as well as I would have liked. It's not a major blemish on the series, but I did want to mention it because I've only praised the series so far, and it does kind of fit perfectly at portraying a flaw of video games as well. So even when it's doing something more poorly, it is still portraying video games really well. I think that's hilarious and just really fits my point. And thankfully, this is where my criticism of the series ends. It's basically just this. Like a really good game, I can get over this one misstep in what is otherwise a really great experience. So to conclude, Shangri-La Frontier is my favorite gaming-related piece of media that is not gaming in itself. It fully understands all the aspects of games and the community surrounding it that makes it so beloved and popular among people in the current day. Sunraku is an awesome main character who's a unique and believable person who gushes with love for gaming. Anyone who has played a game will have something here that reminds them of the fun they've had playing games, and this series just feel like it really gets the essence of what makes the gaming space gaming and the actual games themselves. If you have any passion for gaming, I very highly recommend you give Shangri-La Frontier a watch or a read. And that's the end. Thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe and all that stuff. I talk about anime, manga, and other media here on my YouTube channel and as well on my website, which is in the description. There I blog about the same things that I talk about here on YouTube, but there are some blog posts that I put on there that are not made into videos. So please check that out if you like the things that I have to say.